to me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee in prison and came unto thee?
Yeah. I thought about I had the other piece of music with it. I don't. I'm just making myself a roll up. Hello, anybody there? Hello. Nobody loves me. Anyway, I'm going to read Matthew 27. And I'm going to play some other videos. You haven't seen them, I've come back from the job. It's only out there and busy. Raining. I don't know how these are going to play, so I'm just going to take the risk. You've heard the story anyway plenty of times, you know. You know.
Rabbi. Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?
Take it back. I've betrayed innocent blood.
What is that to us? See to it yourself.
I want no part of it.
Yeah. I may as well play this little bit. Oh, I'll play that later. It's not going to be later. So I'm going to get... I've got my blue letter Bible there. Share screen. Should have set this up before. The trouble is you've got to be careful. Well, I've got to be careful. Because my link to YouTube and whatever, that could be awkward. So there's Matthew 27. I'll put it full screen. So hopefully. Now, I'm on Matthew 27, KJV, obviously. Going right to verse 17. I don't think there's any particular necessity to read, although I would read it later, you know, no problem. This is carrying on from Jesus Christ's arrest. Matthew 27, verse 2. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. Hold on. Let me just make sure that sounds correct. Oh, it is, yeah. Saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. And the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful for to put them into the treasury, because it is a price of blood. And they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Wherefore that field was called the field of blood unto this day. And Matthew 27:9 goes on to reference the prophecy concerning the prophet, saying, then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them for the potter's field as the Lord appointed me. Now, I've read, we've all heard this story, even atheists have, in school, Sunday school maybe, who knows? Why is these cookies turned? Oh yeah. So the thing is here, I tried to make this point with somebody the other day and the week before last. I think it might have been, I'm assuming this, a bit lost on them. That silver was taken out of the temple treasury. It really was. If you read Matthew 27, we could go to the other Gospels to get, I think it's referenced in a couple of the other Gospels, mentioned in most of them, perhaps not John, perhaps not. I should have double checked. But anyway, that money, that silver, apologies for using the word money instead of silver, 30 pieces, was obviously taken from the temple treasury. Judas then went and hanged himself. He saw that he was condemned. How did he see that he was condemned? It's something I will have to think about later. Repented himself and brought again, key word there, again, and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. Well, where would the chief priests and elders normally be? Generally, well, they would be at the temple. How many temples were there in Jerusalem? Only one. I try to reference what I'm saying now on a certain channel. Oh, it could have been a local synagogue. No, it couldn't have been a local synagogue. It says here to the chief priests. The chief priests may well have visited local synagogues, and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple. There was only one temple in Israel, in Jerusalem, and departed and went and hanged himself. On a side note, if only Judas had waited 2 or 3 days, obviously Jesus Christ was resurrected on the 3rd day. All he had to do, well, maybe he should have waited 4 days. All he had to do was go and see Jesus, admit his fault, error, sin, whatever you want to call it, betrayal. Jesus, I am confident, would have forgiven him. I mean, of course he would. You may think it's a minor point. I don't. But anyway, he hanged himself. He didn't go and... obviously, I mean, I can assume that he didn't realise he could have been forgiven. He betrayed Jesus to his face with a kiss. All he had to do was wait 4 days. If he'd only understood that Jesus would have forgiven him. And yeah, we could talk about, was Judas a devil? And the scripture just says so. Jesus Christ describes, and yet one of you is a devil, a demon. I can't. Yeah, a devil. Wasn't he? Didn't use the word demon. So he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple, Matthew 27:5, KJV, and departed and went and hanged himself. And the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood." What are they admitting to, and what are they not denying when Judas brought that silver back? They didn't say, "Oh, we never gave you that," or they didn't deny paying him that money, that silver, from the treasury. And the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, "It is not lawful for to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood." So they're admitting there that silver was blood money. What else are they admitting there? That 30 pieces of silver was taken out of the temple. What is the temple? What did Jesus Christ describe that temple as being? A house of prayer. Right? Do not make my Father's house into a den of thieves. It's the house of prayer. They took that silver out of that very temple, out of that temple treasury, and paid for Jesus to be falsely accused, murdered, and that money became blood money. That's where that silver came from. Minor point, you might think, I'm not making a big deal out of it. I'll be interested to know what you think in the comments. If you do comment, it's unlikely I don't get many people commenting on my channel. Anyway, I'll leave that there. You think about it. I mean, oh dear. I mean, taking the money out of the temple, the 30 pieces of silver, paying Judas to betray Jesus, which he did do, out of that very temple. They planned to kill Jesus, to have him killed at least 2 or 3 years prior to that. They've been waiting for an opportunity. They must have been working on Judas in some way or other, because things weren't going the way Judas sort of expected them to be. And he thought, oh, if I betray Jesus, he'll reveal himself as King of Israel, all the Romans will get kicked out, stuff like that, If you're there, please comment. I can't guarantee that you won't lose your salvation if you do. And I wouldn't be worried about it. Anyway, I'm going to play this little short clip. I'm going to do another video. I've been meaning to do this stream for the last couple of days, actually. I've just been busy, distracted. Anyway, right, I'll get that off screen now. Remove from studio. I've played that. Yeah, think about it. It's not a big deal. I mean, it isn't interesting. It's only a point. Thank you for coming over. I'm not going to say how many's watching. If only it was more. Anyway, I'm going to play this little clip.
Text of Scripture doesn't say. Where does this knowledge come from? For example, 1 Thessalonians 4:3 is a clear statement about the will of God. This is the will of Thessalonians. Calvinists have a way of knowing things that the text of Scripture doesn't say. Where does this knowledge come from? For example, 1 Thessalonians 4:3 is a clear statement about the will of God. This is the will of God that ye abstain from fornication. Yet somehow Calvinists know that it was the decretal will of God when Steve Lawson did not abstain from fornication. How do they know this? There's no text of Scripture that says this. This is pure Gnosticism in practice. They get their gnosis from magic and not from Scripture. Since there are no passages that say Calvinistic distinctives, this kind of gnosis is required for all distinctive Calvinist dogma.
Play that again, maybe.
Calvinists have a way of knowing things that the text of Scripture doesn't say. Where does this knowledge come from? For example, 1 Thessalonians 4:3 is a clear statement about the will of God. This is the will of God that ye abstain from fornication. Yet somehow Calvinists know that it was the decretal will of God when Steve Lawson did not abstain from fornication. How do they know this? There's no text of Scripture that says this. This is pure Gnosticism in practice. They get their gnosis from magic and not from Scripture. Since there are no passages that say Calvinistic distinctives, this kind of gnosis is required for all distinctive Calvinist dogma.
And that actually leads me to another point there. Because a certain clown in California and some other guy from the Boogie Down Bronx, apparently, says that the KJV is monergistic. It isn't. You can't prove monergism from KJV. It's not done by, it isn't translated by Calvinists, but I'm going to, hopefully I can get a private conversation with Brandon. Now, I don't agree with everything Brandon says. And I'll talk to him about a couple of things. Some stuff that perhaps other people are missing, that they aren't quite aware of, I'll say. Because I've been thinking about this subject over the last so-called week or so. Mainly, I mean, I got to admit, mainly since a certain poisonous individual started saying certain things and whatever. And I'm going to play this. Listen to Kevin Thompson. This is from his channel. Oh, there's a couple of other things I wanted to reference, mention to you as a matter of interest. This is about AI. And it's weird, this stuff. I'm going to post a link in the side chat here. Check it out later. It's about 30 minutes. Right. I think it's at least useful for people to check this out. So there you go. Sorry if you can hear me eating. I'm having a Mars bar at the moment, so I can get rid of that tab there. I've just finished listening to that. There's one here the real reason AI researchers are terrified of ChatGPT, the Shongoth incident. So check this one out. I can delete that tab, unpin it. Right. You don't have to. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I really aren't. Oh, hold on. Put too many O's. Oh, I hate this mod. Let's just post that there. Feel free to check it out, or don't. It's up to you. I'm not worried. Not worried at all, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to be helpful. You just can't help people. They take it the wrong way. I'm beginning to lose interest in having any kind of conversation with anybody. And I'm not the best conversationalist. Some people really just aren't worth trying to talk to. You can't communicate with them. And that was evidenced yesterday morning, UK time. What an awful thing. Your faith might not survive this thought experiment. Now, this is a Kevin Thompson video. Go over to his channel. I'll post a link to that video later. In fact, I'll get the link here. And then you can find his channel, can't you? It's easy enough. Have a check out of this video. Your faith might not survive this thought experiment. It's not a thought of experiment in the right. Hopefully the link shows up okay. And there you go. So there's two video links to stuff on AI, which I think it would be, I wouldn't say valuable, but interesting to watch. Especially this one, the Shongoth incident. You pronounce it any way you want. I see two G's joined together. I'm going to treat it as it does in the Greek as NG. Anyway, your faith might not, and this is the video I'm going to play now. Your faith might not survive this thought experiment. The link's there. Feel free to subscribe to Kevin Thompson's channel. I hope you will. I haven't spoken to him in a while now. It must be nearly a year. So I'm going to see if I can get him to come to my channel again. I hope he will do so. I don't know. There's my PayPal for Kindle books. Oh, there it is. That's a better one. Anyway. PayPal me /Bob635122. So anyway, or don't, it's up to you. I'm not begging. Not going to lick your boots either. If you do donate. Right, I'm going to play this.
With you, and your faith might not survive this thought experiment. If you do it correctly, I don't think your faith will survive this thought experiment in its current form. And so I want to weed out two kinds of viewers before we get started. When I say your faith won't survive, I consider myself to be more Christian now than I've ever been. But the way I see things now, I can't think of a single belief that I held 10 years ago that isn't modified majorly in some major way. So So the two kind of people that I want to weed out are, number one, the people who self-assess that you're not ready to make a change or grow or have a disruption. Okay, and I don't mean that as a bad thing, because maybe you're going through a lot, maybe you're under a lot of stress, maybe you just overcame a change or something, and it's just not a good time for a disruptive change in your spiritual life to occur right now. Or maybe you are extremely happy and satisfied with your spiritual environment. If you're going to a church, you just really like how everything's happening right now. You probably do not want to do this thought experiment, okay? Because if you do this thought experiment right, it's going to disrupt your ability to enjoy that or find meaning for that, find meaning in that and peace there. It's going to be disruptive, kind of like new technology can sometimes be disruptive to an industry. This is going to be disruptive if you do it right. So if you're not ready, and it's okay to not be ready, it's not a bad thing. It's not everybody's ready for everything all the time. You can't put a second grader in college, and I'm not trying to compare anybody to second graders. I'm just saying not everybody's ready for everything all the time. So that's one person. The other kind of person I want to weed out is the person who's going.
Oh, by the way, I have already listened to this. I may even listen to it again in the next day or so.
Going to hear the thought experiment. After I lay the groundwork, you're going to hear what the thought experiment is, and you're immediately going to negate it. And you're even going to negate it with a bunch of Bible verses for why that wouldn't work. Okay? And I know what they are, okay? Because you got to remember, I have a fundamentalist background. I've been in Awanas. I've memorized. I have a theology degree. I was independent Baptist, and if you don't know independent Baptists, we know our Bible better than anybody. So, and I'm not saying this is a prideful thing. I'm just saying when you just quote verses at me, you're wasting your breath, because I already know about them. I already know what they say. I already know all the different ways that they can be framed. Okay, I already know it. So if you're just going to listen and negate what I'm saying or argue with me, I would like you to not watch the video either. You're not going to mop up what I'm spilling. This isn't going to be helpful for you, and you're not ready for this yet. You might be ready in a few years. But this is, I only want people here and listening to this who are ready for growth and for a change, and who are ready to encounter a disruption in how they view spirituality at all. Okay? So if that's you, welcome aboard. If that's not you, please do not watch the video. Just go watch something else. Go do something else. We have a lot of other content. Watch someone else's channel. Doesn't matter. I don't care. Just don't watch this one. Okay? So hopefully by now we've taken the, Gideon's 10,000. We've whittled it down to 300. I don't want a lot of people watching this who aren't ready to do this to give it serious, because I really want some feedback on this. I really want people to do this seriously over a protracted amount of time, and then come back and tell me how that's going for you. Okay? I've said things before on the channel. There's certain videos I put out. I was just talking to a friend yesterday who watches the channel. I said, if you internalize what I'm going to say here, you're not going to be able to enjoy church anymore. And this is one of those things, if you can really do this. So let me lay the groundwork for this thought experiment that I want you to do. And I want to make a promise to you that this will, if you're interested in self-development or ego work or what it means to be a true elder, this one thing can really be a dividing line, or like a line in the sand or a litmus test, not in a logical fallacy kind of way, but it can really help you self-assess what it is that needs to change about you and what you need to do. And it can also help you assess, if you're in a spiritual environment with other spiritual leaders, is this person a spiritual leader? You can assess pretty quickly based on this one thing. I've gone through a change in my life. I'm laying the groundwork, where some people would call it deconstruction, but I don't like that word for a host of reasons. It's become loaded, and a lot of people are against it. I've started to listen to people lately who used to also be fundamentalists, real similar to me, and they're not anymore. Now, some of these people are no longer Christian, but they still believe in God, or they're no longer theists at all, and they're atheist or agnostic. But these people, what they have in common that I don't have in common, they deconstructed. And what that is they became aware of enough inconsistencies to them about maybe it's contradictions in the Bible, maybe it's this, the background scholarly work shows that maybe Paul didn't write the pastoral epistles, or just all kinds of things like that, that caused them to realize in their minds, and I'm not saying I do or don't agree with any of this kind of stuff, but what's happening to them is all the structures that gave them the reasons for their faith, like all the stuff you hear in apologetics, that stuff, maybe there was a lot of it, like a preponderance of it, but it kind of started dropping like flies, and then pretty soon they're just left with nothing holding that up anymore. And that's kind of where they are. Now, the people I've been listening to, they come across as genuine and honest and that kind of thing, and they're kind of fun to listen to, but we did a video recently on your unconscious programming. I think that the unconscious programming that they have, it's important to watch that video. The unconscious programming that they have is still there, and the fact that it's still there is why they just deconstructed and there's nothing else left. It's just things just went away. Nothing came to replace it. That kind of thing. Now, we'll say that at this point, they're probably more intellectually honest, easier to talk to, less ideologically driven, probably a lot more fun to be around as a person than back when they were a rigid ideological fundamentalist, back like I was, okay? And so a lot of what they say doesn't bother me anymore like it would when they're trying to point out contradictions or the authenticity of the book or certain beliefs people have about the inerrancy and infallibility of the Word of God, all this kind of stuff. There was a time when that kind of thing would bother me. And it doesn't bother me to hear it anymore. But what happened to me is different than what happened to them, okay? So we're all trucking along with our post-Enlightenment scientific worldview, scientific materialist worldview based on literalism and Aristotelian logic, something like that. And all of the apologetics that comes out of Christianity is also based on that. So when it's shown that the Bible's construction or contents or something like that doesn't measure up to that framework, we think it's wrong. And then it crumbles away, but that framework stays. You see, the framework of that post-Enlightenment scientific materialist kind of mindset is with a reductionistic, Aristotelian, simple, literal logic kind of mindset. That's still there in a lot of these people who have deconstructed. And I think that may be the problem. But that's fine. What I want to tell you what's different about me versus other people who have deconstructed, even though now we're both okay, we're both non-ideologues, and we're both better at critical thinking and all that kind of stuff than we were when we were fundamentalists. Both first principles thinking, all that kind of stuff. Epistemic humility. I didn't have my faith chipped away because the claims of it failed to align with the structure of validation and merit that I had been programmed with, like what happened to them. I had an experience. I'm not trying to sell my experience to you here. I'm just trying to tell you what's different about me. I had an experience. I had what you might call a vision, a mystical experience. I've talked about it in other videos. And the point isn't for you to believe my experience or to replicate it or anything. It's my experience, okay? It means something to me. I'm not sure still exactly what it means, but it means something to me, okay? But when that happened, this happened in 2019. And when that happened, almost immediately, I saw everything that the Bible would be pointing to. I experienced it. I had a participatory event occur to me wherein I experienced and saw everything that the Bible would be pointing to as the thing, which is, it's ineffable, so it's no point trying to describe it. I saw it, I experienced it firsthand. And ever since then, I've been having more detailed experiences of the thing. And I've even gotten to the point where I can, instead of it happening spontaneously without me knowing that it's coming, I can put myself in that mindset. When that happened, now that I saw what it's pointing to, I no longer need the pointer. Does that make sense? I was driving on the GPS with the GPS in my car the other day, and I was going to a certain location, and I got close enough to where I could see the tall building in the distance. It wasn't even too far away. And at that point, I kind of have my bearings. I'm actually looking at the thing. I no longer need a map or a GPS to tell me where to turn, how to go, how to get there. Okay, I can see it now. So once I see it, I no longer need the GPS. I'm working off vision now, right? You get the idea? And so at that point, now that I saw and experienced what the Bible was pointing to, I no longer need it to not have contradictions or be in there and infallible, or all be pointing all the doctrine being written in service to some systematic theology that's perfect up in heaven somewhere, that's all unified and connected. And James somewhere have the same thing, or Paul and James somewhere somehow have the same thing in mind, the same system of doctrines that they're talking to, and we just have to find the right perspective, and then we'll get the semantically I don't need that anymore. Like, I don't need any of that. I don't need the books to be written by Moses or Paul. I don't need any of that. I've seen the thing. And so to me, the Bible went from being a crutch and this authoritative thing to being this beautiful, transparent thing. It's this beautiful, transparent. I don't know how to say it. I don't feel like I'm being very articulate right now, using the word "thing" here. And I still have. I have more respect for the Bible now than I did before. And I would not say that my positions or beliefs about it have diminished, but I just see more clearly what it's there for. Okay. And it's, I don't need. So if you could come up with all kinds of scholarly scientific work and tell me as many things as you can about how there's errors and contradictions and everything else, and it wouldn't faze me at all because I've seen the thing. I've seen what it's all trying to point to. Okay. You know the old story about the finger pointing to the moon. Modern Christianity is making the mistake of, instead of looking at what it's pointing, instead of looking at the moon, they're looking at the finger, and then everyone's arguing over whose finger is better, whose pointer is better, that kind of thing, who's interpreting the pointer the best. But once you look at the moon, you no longer need the finger pointing at it. Just like when you no longer. When you grow up, you no longer need your parents to serve in a nurturing role as you needed when you were younger. It's not that you don't appreciate and love your parents or spend time with them. And same things with the Bible. It's like it's not that I don't love it and appreciate it and spend time with it. I spend a lot of time in my Bible, and it's much more enjoyable now. But it's not this brownie point system. Spend enough time in the Word, and it's going to make a certain percentage of my sins go away. It's not this kind of thing where I feel better about myself and holy for having read it at least 4 times a week and that kind of thing. It's not like that at all. Okay, that would be just as silly as thinking that a certain amount of times that you talk to your parents on the phone now as an adult somehow is correlative to the degree to which you need to brush your teeth and go to bed on time. It's just things that they don't match up. They're not needed for that anymore. So that's where I am. So there's a very different thing for me. So when these people are talking about all these scholarly things, and I hear, I'm trying not to say names. The names are on the tip of my tongue. Some of the people I listen to that are interesting to me. I used to preach sermons against some of these people, or people who talked like them, about how they'll cause you to apostatize and all this kind of stuff. And so now if I hear evidential or scholarly kind of things that negate the Bible, it's not really negating the Bible in what it's actually pointing to, which I've seen. It's only negating the Bible's alignment with a predisposition toward a materialist mindset that's fixated on hyperliteralism with Aristotelian logic. And the Bible doesn't align with the wrong mindset, is all they're telling me. And we've pointed out also before how when Mufasa is talking to Simba about the light in The Lion King, he's not trying to give scientific information about what light is or how it works. He's giving him orienting information about what the light tells us. The light defines the borders of the kingdom. Do not go beyond there, or the hyenas will tear you to shreds. That kind of thing. And so the Bible is more like Mufasa's guidance, and it's less like a scientist trying to tell you how light works. Now, if everybody knew that, it would be helpful. But it's this weird thing where participatory knowledge is ostensive knowledge, ostensible knowledge. Like an ostensive definition of something is like when you have a child and you want to tell them what a cat is. So you don't explain that they're a mammal with 4 legs of vertebrate. You don't explain all that. You actually point to a cat and you pet the cat and you say, cat. That is an ostensive definition. And there are certain things about God that can only be known ostensively, or what you might say participatorily, perspectively, and they cannot be. They're ineffable to the point where they can't be communicated to those who have not seen the cat in this case, okay? I mean, if you try to explain a cat to a 2-year-old who's never seen a cat, there's nothing happening. There's no communication happening there, okay? Well, what do? We show them pictures, or we show them an actual cat. Show them an actual horse. This is a horse. This is a dog. That's ostensive definitions. And there are certain things about spirituality that cannot be taught, cannot be transmitted. They can only be ostensively known. And so when we build religions around transmitting things to that which can only be ostensively known, everything's wrong. Everything about how we do everything is wrong. So one thought that I had, this isn't the thought experiment, but one thought that I had for all these people who are talking about all the contradictions in the Bible and the errors and how it doesn't match up and how this author, that book is probably a forgery and all this kind of stuff. They also point out things like the genocide in the Bible, how slavery and rape is condoned, and I know all the apologetic arguments about all that stuff. I know it, okay? So this isn't about that. I got it. But the point is, my question in my head is, what version of Christianity would they not object to? That's an interesting thing to think about. And when I think that, it occurs to me that what their problem is with Christianity is not so much the Bible itself, but really what is done with it, and to take it a step further, what is done with it institutionally. Because as soon as you believe something to be infallible and inerrant, and from God, and authoritative, infallible, and inerrant, that kind of thing, as soon as you believe that, everybody's jumping on that train to try to borrow power from it, to try to take that power and cast it down to fortify and bolster their own in-group hierarchies. That's what people do with it. In other words, what it does, when you have in-groups that form around those kinds of beliefs and thoughts, it's a breeding ground for toxicity up to and including very terrible murder, as history has shown us. So it's not so much what's in the Bible that causes people to be murderous. It's people who do the wrong thing with it. That's why Christians have burned people at the stake. They've drowned people. Christians have done horrible, horrible things. And if you've ever debated doctrine with people, you know that there are people alive today to where if it wasn't illegal, they would burn you now. They would strangle you now. They would drown you now. They would shoot you now over theological disagreements if they could. If you took the same person now and put him back in 1600 Salem, they would be leading the charge to burn the witches. They would be burning Michael Servetus. They would be the Lutherans burning the Anabaptists and drowning them. They'd be right there. You could tell. I actually had one guy online say that. People who disagree with these certain doctrines shouldn't be allowed to live. Shouldn't, that's scary. It's very scary. And so regardless of your thoughts, now when you hear me call into question, when I start talking about the authority of the Bible and the infallibility and inerrancy of the Bible, some of those doctrines, they're Johnny-come-latelys. They're post-Enlightenment rationalisms. They're not really things that people talked that way back. Maybe there were one or two, but it's the way we talk about that kind of thing today is kind of a recent thing. And it doesn't make any sense, because you'll see a statement of faith at a church and it'll say something stupid like, we believe the 66 books of the Bible to be the verbal, plenary, inspired, infallible word of the living God in the originals. What does that mean? It means that you don't believe in anything authoritative that you can get your hands on. Well, it's mostly, it's enough. Okay. I know all the arguments. I'm not here to argue that point. I'm here to show you how stupid that statement is. Why have a doctrine about something that is inerrant and infallible that nobody alive today has ever seen? And even when there were originals, first of all, how would you you're just going to have this statement that they were infallible in the originals? Have you seen them? Have you verified that? Is that a scientific statement? Or is that just you're just going to assert that affirmation? And you can't be part of our group unless you also assert that affirmation. Like, I haven't seen those. And you know what? The originals were never compiled together in a single book, which means the Bible spoken about in the statement of faith of most churches has never existed. It doesn't exist now. It's never existed anywhere. It's not there. So why have a doctrine about the infallibility and inerrancy of something that isn't that way now? Okay? It's because you're supposed to say it. It feels good to say it. It's got this certainty to it. And if you're the leader, if you're the pastor or the bishop or the cardinal or the pope or the whatever, it gives you all this power to wield over people. And there's a lot of very subtle psychological power shifting. As soon as you believe something is authoritative, inerrant, and infallible, there's all kinds of people that suddenly start borrowing power from that become seen as authority figures representing that power. And everybody wants in on that game. When the mustard seed grows up, all the trees come lodge in the branches. So what happens in that mindset? If you have that mindset, it's a breeding ground for toxicity. And that's pretty much the only consistent thing that has ever come out of propositionally reductive Christianity is toxicity. That's the people say there's no hate like Christian love. And that's true, right? The kind of Christianity that we have is not the kind of Christianity that the Bible's trying to point to. And so what the problem is the institutionalization, the power struggles, the hierarchies, the dogmas, the toxicity, the narcissistic gaslighting, the in-grouping and out-grouping, the spiritual abuse. It's never going to go away. That's not a bug in the system. That's the main feature. Okay? When you talk about all the abuse that's happened, the stuff that makes the news is just the stuff that breaks the law, and that's just the stuff that gets reported. But all the little micro-toxicities. I came up with I said something today that occurred to me. Somebody said something about Calvinism, and I found myself saying this sentence, that the propagation of Calvinism is, what did I say? The propagation of Calvinism is on a carrier of gaslighting that is effective with people who have an anxious attachment style. Their attachment style is anxious. So it is most effective with people who are anxious attached. Something like that. And it's bizarre how many parallels there are. I've had to become educated in the psychological realm because of some problems in my life and mental illnesses in some of my family members, and then my previous marriage and all that. I've had to become educated in these areas, and it's amazing to me how many parallels there are in basically cluster B personality disorders, like narcissism and borderline personality disorder, and people who adhere to ideologies, especially if they're in leadership. Calvinism and narcissism are real strongly connected, but so is extreme, like on the non-Calvinist side, the extreme dispensational, King James only, premillennial, pre-trib. There's a lot of narcissism there too. It's not, doesn't matter really sometimes what the exact content of the dogma is, but the fact that something is seen as infallible and authoritative is this big mustard tree that attracts all kinds of fowls to come lodge in the branches. And that word fowl could be a pun, where fowls, like rancid birds, if you will. So what if, you ready? Here's the thought experiment. And don't put in the comments, he doesn't get to the thought experiment until minute 32. Don't do that. Okay, that's not the point, because the groundwork that we laid is very important. But the thought experiment is, I just got a message from somebody that is a little alarming. The thought experiment is, imagine a Christianity where there's only one rule, okay? And the one rule is that nobody is allowed to tell anybody else. Nobody is allowed to apply any part of the Bible to anybody else in particular. Think about that. I'm going to say it again. The thought experiment is, imagine a version of Christianity where the one rule is that nobody is allowed to apply any part of the Bible to anybody else in particular. Like, you can't pick any particular person. So a church can't apply, a pastor couldn't apply any particular passage to his people. A wife couldn't apply any passages for how her husband should be behaving to anybody. You can't apply anything to anybody else. Okay. So along with that, there's all kinds of different applications, because there's an application to think a certain way, to believe a certain way, okay, to behave a certain way. And what this would mean is that you could not, the one rule would extend in this way. You could not use the Bible as your reason or authority to tell anybody else what to think, what to believe, or how to behave. You couldn't do that. Now, as you're thinking about that for a second, I know the verses. Some of y'all, if you're still here and I didn't get rid of you in the beginning of the video, you might be thinking of verses like reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. I know where you're going with it. You're like, how would that work? If you're thinking, how would that work? I don't see how this would work. How would you do this thing? Well, for that verse in particular, basically you would reprove, rebuke, exhort anybody who's not following the one rule. Okay. I'm not trying to sell this thought experiment, this one rule, as scriptural or authoritative or anything like that. This is just a thought experiment. I just want you to think about this. Now, can you imagine, okay, if you can't do that, what would you do when you got to church? If you can't imagine what would be done when you got to church in that scenario, then it's very important that you are not in a position of leadership in any kind of church. You are not a genuine elder. If you can't imagine what edification would be taking place. I can't use the Bible to tell anybody. I need to turn off my notifications here. I can't use the Bible to tell anybody I can't apply any passage to anybody else in particular. So, what would you do? Okay. What would you do when you got together? Who would talk? What would it be about? What would be going on? What does edification look like in that scenario? What does that look like? So there's two things I want you to think about. If you can't imagine, I can imagine perfectly what would be going on. There would be a lot of activity. There'd be a lot of things going on. Okay. There'd be a lot of talking without this thing happening. But I don't think you would have toxicity. You wouldn't have power struggle in group hierarchies based on whether or not, what are your beliefs? What are your beliefs about this? Can't tell anybody what to believe. So I can envision this. If you can't envision this, then you have no place, you have no business being, you are not actually a genuine elder in Christ's church. You have no business being in leadership if you can't envision what this would be like. So right off the bat, one of the applications of this thought experiment is it immediately exposes who should and who shouldn't be overseers in a church, bishops, elders, overseers, that kind of thing. It also informs us what shouldn't be going on, what could be going on. There's a lot of do space here that I think a lot of people, once you take that thing away in the negative space, I think it's a vacuum for a lot of you. You don't know what else would be going on there. Which kind of makes it fun. Now, so that's one application, is it carries over to church leadership. The second application is that the degree to which you don't like that is the degree to which your religion lives in your ego, not in your perennial self. That's good to know. So this is for those of you who are interested in identifying your ego and shedding it and getting rid of it or transcending it, however you want to call it, you always need an ego, or you couldn't interact with anybody in the world societally. So, for those of you who are interested in doing ego work, when you do this thought experiment and you think about, okay, what are we doing here? I can't use the Bible to tell anybody else what they should believe, think, or do. The degree to which you don't like that or can't envision what else you would be doing in Christianity is the degree to which your Christianity is part of your ego, not your perennial self. When Paul's talking in Romans chapter 7, now here I am about to use scripture to tell you what to do or think, right? That's the irony of it, is that you can't, if you're a smart aleck out there and you want to call me a hypocrite, that's not the kind of person I'm trying to talk to right now. But when Paul is talking in Romans chapter 7, and he talks about it's no longer I that doeth this, but sin that dwelleth in me, what I'm trying to do is relate to you here so you can understand this. The part that's doing the sinning is the egoic self or the false self or the temporal self. It doesn't matter what you call it. I'm not trying to, the terminology isn't important like it is in dogmatism. It's always funny. I always want to ask a Calvinist to describe God's sovereignty without using the word sovereignty in their own words. And they can't do it. It's funny. Because they use the word sovereignty to try to avoid what they're really saying. So it's kind of funny. So on this channel, we do not operate in a way where the way things are worded, the finger pointing at the moon isn't the important thing. Okay? But there is a false self or a temporal self or an ego self. Doesn't matter what you call it. And then there is a true self, an authentic self, a perennial self. This helps identify or separate. And what people don't know, they're engaged in a spiritual practice, a spiritual exercise. I'm going to church, I'm learning this doctrine. They think they're becoming spiritual. And all they're doing is bolstering the ego. They're adding more things to the ego. It's like being in a hoarder's house and you're just adding more clutter. That's all that's happening for most people's religion. That's all that was happening in my religion. So you have to have this discipline of not letting things come into your mind. First of all, cut off the main line, stop the bleeding, if you will, right? stop things from coming into your mind. And when things do come into your mind, they need to be very carefully curated. And then you start kicking a lot of stuff out of your mind. Think of your mind like a hoarder's house, and you just need to get rid of everything, okay? And even the stuff that's in there, it's probably rotten and gross and has bugs in it. You just get rid of as much as you can get a hold of. I want to do another video on having as few opinions and beliefs as possible. But we'll talk about that in that video. So this thought experiment can help you identify the degree to which you don't like that. You can't use the Bible in any way you can't apply any part of the Bible to anybody else. And so there's this aspect of it that's kind of like if you've seen The Matrix, kind of like the Oracle. When they went to see the Oracle, there was no claim that what the Oracle would say would be true. That's not the claim that they make. The only claim they make, I'm going to do another video on don't make claims, but the only claim they make about the Oracle is that she will tell you what you need to hear. Isn't that interesting? And so an individual in this situation, an individual would be going to the Bible to see what is in there that they may need to hear. And you look at Romans 5 and you can mix this with your experience and your tribulations, approaching things with faith and hope, and it'll result in love and wisdom, ideally, because love and wisdom are conjugate. They have to be. You can't have one without the other. Genuinely. So you're constantly going back from your experience to the Bible, and you're trying to see, you're realizing it's in there to do something for you. But what exactly? And that's kind of like the Oracle. There's no claim about it being true or infallible or anything like that. That's what you need to hear. What can I do? What can I take from this that will enhance my life, my growth, my trajectory? So why would you get together? The reason you would get together. So like you might be asking that question. I can't imagine what would be happening in an assembly of Christians when they get together if you can't tell people what to think, believe, and do. And so the reason that you would get together is simply on the basis, not that you have any opinions in mind or anything, but that for whatever reason, maybe one opinion, that interfacing with the Bible can be beneficial to your future self. That's the only reason you're in fellowship with somebody else, because of that one opinion. Interfacing with the Bible can be beneficial to my future self. And I say interfacing because I'm not saying believing what it says. I'm not saying being dogmatic, developing doctrines, okay? Why is the story about, why the account, why are the genocides and the slavery and the condoned rape, why is that in there? So you're going to be wrestling with the text in that way. Why would somebody write that down, and why would it stand the test of time? If 2 Timothy is a forgery and Paul didn't write it, why did somebody write it? How did it make it into the Bible? Why did it stand the test of time? And then when I read it, what does that do for me? Okay? And so the Bible's still going to affect you, but you're going to be asking different kinds of questions. And you're going to be asking the kind of question about why did this get compiled this way? And why are so many people drawn to it? Why did it stand the test of time? When you ask a question like that, like you would a movie, like why has everyone watched XYZ movie? Why has Gone with the Wind stood the test of time? Okay, so it becomes something to experience. Nobody's walking around, not that I know of, preaching Gone with the Wind, but a lot of people consider it to be worth the time to watch and very interesting for a lot of different reasons. And so you would be asking questions like that. And when you start to ask that kind of question, instead of immediately trying to apply some kind of dogmatic belief or behavior to yourself or to other people, it's this kind of curiosity that takes over. And so then when you're interacting with somebody else, instead of telling them what to believe, think, or do, you would be sharing personally what you're doing. Maybe you would be sharing some of your goals, and maybe somebody could give you some tips on what you could do. Some tips on how to interface, how to do Lectio Divina or something like that. Practices. And you could argue, well, I was just telling you what to do. Not in a dogmatic way. Not in a you have to get married and not cheat and follow the rule and the husband's the leader. Not this kind of thing, you see. It'd be more like a coach telling a player, if you want to be better at shooting free throws, maybe you should go shoot some free throws. Maybe you could get a coach to make sure your form is correct. You see, it becomes it depends on what your goals are. So how is interfacing with the Bible helping you reach your goals or not? And is there anything else I could be doing to get the Bible to make my future self more like how I envision it to be in its best possible outcome? So edification would be more something like that, and less of this telling people what to think, what to believe, how to think, and what to do and how to behave. Couldn't tell people how to behave. Now, the next thing. This is very important that you get this. This is a very important point. You need to get this. A good clinician, like a good therapist, they understand that you can't tell your clients what to do. And let me clarify what I mean by this. What I mean is decisions in your life. They will tell them things like, okay, here's a workbook, and I want you to read this information so that you're familiar with the lingo, and here's some tools that you can use. Here's, I got the dialectical behavioral therapy workbook up there. I want you to go through this workbook, and when you're finished, you'll have some tools at your disposal that if you practice them, you'll be able to communicate with your husband or wife better than you do now. So they'll tell you things to do like that. They'll give you homework, do this worksheet, fill this out, pick out your values, but they're not telling you decisions to make. Yes, you should marry that person. No, you shouldn't marry that person. Yes, you should have a baby. No, you shouldn't. Yes, you should adopt. No, you shouldn't. Yes, you should join that church. No, you shouldn't. Yes, you should be a member. They're not telling you things like that. You see the difference that I'm saying here? So when I say a therapist is not going to tell somebody what to do, it doesn't mean they're not going to give them guidance and things that will build their tools and skills. They will tell them to do those kinds of things, but they're not going to make life decisions for them. Yes, you need to quit that job. Can't tell them stuff like that. And it's very important because there's a flip side of this coin. If you tell somebody what to do, what they should do, and I want you to think of the word should and ought. Right? If you tell somebody what they should or what they ought to do, if it works out, then the individual associates that success with somebody else's decision and guidance. Now authority still rests outside them, because in stages of growth, having an internalized locus of authority is very important after you leave stage 3. And so now you still have an external locus of authority for decision making. It's now your therapist or whoever it is that gave you the advice to do a particular life decision a certain way. So when it works out, you're not any better at deciding. And when you learn from the consequences, you're not learning from the consequences of your own decisions. You're learning from the consequences of somebody else's decisions. And so if it works out well, you're still investing power in some entity outside yourself, and you're not getting any better at decision making. You need to make your own decisions. If it doesn't work out, now you have to bear the consequences of that decision that you didn't make. Somebody else made. Now the therapist, oh yeah, you should marry that person. And now things are just terrible because you shouldn't have done that. But it's not affecting the therapist, you see. They can issue out guidance for what you should and ought to do all day long and never suffer the consequences. They might lose a client and that's it. But they never suffer. They don't have to go through the bad marriage they told you to get into and all the situations that come with it. They don't have to go through that. You do. Okay? And so now you're going to become resentful. Well, no, I hate that person, and I hate that therapist, and I hate therapy in general. Okay? You see the problem? So it's very, very important, and therapists, clinicians understand this, to never make life decisions for people. Never tell people what to do in terms of life decisions. They always have to make up their own mind. Now, you can give them tools and remind them of things, and maybe you help the light come on, but they have to make the decision. They have to make the decision. So what do you think happens? Imagine, I'm hoping you can mop up what I'm spilling here, how important it is for people to learn how to make their own decisions. Good psychology tells you that a young man, especially, should spend the decade between the age of 20 and 30 making his own decisions and learning from the consequences of those decisions. Make a bunch of small decisions and learn from the consequences. What worked, what didn't work. You get practice making decisions. You learn judgment, and you learn what works and what doesn't work, and you learn to trust yourself or not, okay? And you don't have anybody else to get bitter about if it doesn't work out, and you learn how to make consequences and results turn out more like how you want them to. You have to learn to do that. So what happens in Christianity, especially if you're raised in a Christian home, you spend that decade doing all the things that you should or ought to do based on what your religious dogma says. You should marry someone like this. You should have a traditional house where husband goes to work, wife stays home, and you have complementary roles. You should homeschool. You should put them in private school. You should put them in public school. You got these institutions telling you what you should and shouldn't do. And so you spend the first decade of your adult life making decisions or executing decisions that were made outside of you, essentially. Now, you may have picked the person you're going to marry, but you're going to structure that relationship in accordance with the ideology about what you should and shouldn't do, who should and shouldn't be involved. You're structuring it in accordance with the ideology. You're not making your own decisions. And so when later in life, when the fur hits the fans and all those decisions start to, the consequences of those decisions start to come home to roost, you are stuck with them. And guess what? You didn't make any of those decisions. Your ideology made those decisions. But and now what's going to happen to people now? They're going to get bitter and resentful. And they're going to get bitter and resentful at the church, and they're going to start to hate God. Not everybody reacts the same way. But when you think about how people's lives are going and how some people are cynical and bitter and resentful and nihilistic even, you can kind of see how this comes about. They're reaping the consequences, the terrible consequences of decisions that they didn't make. That they allowed themselves to be the conduit of an egregore who's making decisions about their life through them, but they aren't making their own actual decisions. So the one thing, and from a clinical therapy side, the one thing that you should never do is you should never tell people what they ought to or what they should do with regard to life decisions. That's the only thing that Christianity does. It's very, like when I say Christianity, I'm not talking about real Christianity. I'm talking about the version that we know of when you go to church somewhere. It's all about telling people what they should do. Here's what you should do. Here's how your life should be structured. Here's how your relationships should be structured, especially if you're married. And here's how your relationship with your kids or with your parents should be structured. Here's the kind of job you should or should not have. It's all in the ideology. It's all there. And then there's all kinds of different flavors of it that show up in different institutional structures and denominations and types of churches and stuff. When I was going to there's certain churches that tend to attract businessmen and lawyers and doctors, and then there's certain kinds of churches that tend to attract blue-collar workers, and everybody there has a broken-down car. And I mean, there's certain kind of churches. I went to a church once where you were looked down on if you had a job where you used your head instead of some kind of technical thing where you're using your hands or doing manual labor. Like if you're an air conditioner repairman or a mechanic, those are okay. Those are good. If you're out mowing lawns or digging ditches or gardening, that's all okay. But if you're an accountant or something, if you're sitting at a desk somewhere, or if your job is to talk to people or to do work on a computer, that wasn't real work. And the Bible verse in Ephesians 4 where it says, "Let him that stole steal no more, but work with his hands." You weren't following that verse if you had a job where you used your head. And I was an officer in the military at the time, and so I was a second-class citizen in that church because I always had jobs. I was working at tech support one time. I was working for Cox Communication. I was tech support for a while. And I sat at a computer and I helped people solve their internet problems. And that wasn't real work. That wasn't a real job to this place. Things like that. Strange. Strange. And so they're telling you what you should do. That was the point I'm getting at. There's this, sometimes it's overt. And this guy, I could go on and on about this guy, but he would tell people who to marry, meddle in all kinds of things in people's lives. Now, maybe your experience isn't that detailed, but ideology in general, it's telling you what you should and shouldn't do, making major life decisions. And when it comes to I've said this before, but a lot of the guidance in the Bible, especially from Paul, is really, it's pre-transformational guidance. It's basically how to not make a mess of your life before you start to cultivate wisdom. Once you start to cultivate wisdom, once you start to see the thing, you kind of no longer need to be told what to do. You no longer need rules to follow, because love and wisdom, when they conjugate together, and when you have vision, and when you've seen the thing, there's no set of rules that will live up to that. That will live up to how adaptive that. There's no set of rules that is as adaptive as the combination of love, wisdom, and vision. And vision, strategy, and culture, that kind of thing. So the thought experiment is to never imagine a Christian community, assembly, if you will, where the one rule is that you can't apply anything in the Bible to anybody else in particular. You can't tell anybody what to think, believe, or do. This helps you identify if somebody cannot imagine what an assembly would do. If you're not doing that, then that's obviously who should not be in charge. They should not be an overseer or a pastor or anything like that. They're not a genuine elder. They're not really doing Christianity. When you look at say, if you go, I always like to use Karate Kid. If you look at Mr. Miyagi versus Sensei Kreese, which one do you think represents genuine karate as it was intended, as it originated in Japan? You probably think like Mr. Miyagi's version of it. This is not this pompous, arrogant, gotta fight everybody kind of. He's not seeking out teachers to have a class under him. He's just being, okay? And that's the kind of Christianity that we want. The kind of people who are trying to be in charge of everyone else and tell everyone else what to do and be at the top or middle management of some kind of hierarchical structure, okay? Dogmatic ideology has affordances for that, and people like to be in a structure like that eventually kind of puts you at the top of something. Oh, I get to go be a deacon or a pastor of a church or something like that. It's easy to do that in ideology. It's not easy for people to just be, to be a, apartment repairman and sit in your room and clip bonsai trees all day after your wife died. People can't be with themselves. They have to be controlling something. Okay? You just can't be. Just be. And so it also, the degree to which you're not sure, you don't like that, or it doesn't sit well with you, or you're not sure what you would do as an individual, in that scenario is the degree that's an information to you of how egoic, how false self your version of Christianity is, and how you need to get to a real version of Christianity in this thought experiment. And we talked about how you should never tell somebody what to do, as or to say it positively. People need to learn to make their own decisions and learn from the consequences of their own decisions and become better decision makers without following a code or a structure of what they should or shouldn't do. Now, I'm not saying go around killing people, nothing like that. Don't run off wild with what I'm trying to say here. Hear what I'm saying. Mop up what I'm spilling. So this is a thought experiment, and I want you to, if you made it this far, I want you to sit with that thought experiment, like meditate on it. Think about how it would go. Maybe get a couple people to try it with you. I want to hear some feedback from some of you who are actually mopping up what I'm spilling here. What the implications of this would be, and if some of you can try to practice it, how would that go? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Shoot me an email. Let me know what your thoughts are, especially after you sit with it for a while. Sit with this for about a month or two, and then I want to hear what happens in your head. And also, if you really do this thought experiment, and then you go back to church, you're going to come across all kinds of places that you're going to find abrasive now that weren't before, and that's a good thing. It means you're becoming more aware. It means you're waking up. It's a good thing. You should do that. I'm not talking about being hypercritical or being unkind or anything like that. If you enjoy what you're getting here, support the channel financially. We have 5 different electronic ways at beyondthefundamentals.com. We couldn't do this without support from people like you. If you want to see this continue, the support's important. It takes a lot of time, space, resources, energy, money, software subscriptions. It takes all kinds of effort to bring this content to you, and a lot of thought preparation time. And I hope that you can be a beneficiary of the efforts that we put out. And if you think that it's beneficial, consider joining those who support. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you, and good day.
came unto me. And shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee?